Welcome, everyone. It's good to see you through this medium and be able to communicate. And this afternoon, we want to focus on sharing with you what's going on with our church openings here in Chesapeake. It has been an incredible experience, learning experience in so many different ways. Closing the churches was easy in the sense of there's a pandemic, there was an order, and we all closed almost at the same time, I think. And so that part was easy. When we started thinking about opening the churches, the question was, how are we going to do it? Because it wasn't just a matter of saying, all right, everybody, church is open, welcome back. It was more than that. So this afternoon, we want to talk to some of our pastors that have gone through this experience and what they have done to get there, what were they afraid of when they were thinking about it, and what has been the result of it. We have three pastors that have done it in different ways and different times. And so we're going to go ahead and explore that. We're going to start with Pastor Reynard. Pastor Stander is our pastor in Williamsport on what we call the western part of our conference. And so he's one of the pastors, I think that in this group was probably one that opened earliest. I could be wrong about that, but I think that was the case. And so how, Pastor Stander, how do you go about first thinking about how would you going to open the church? Was it stressful? Was it easy as, all right, let's do it, and everybody was in agreement? How did that work out?
Yes, Pastor, it was very stressful because at first when we closed, March 14th were our last Sabbath open, and there was quite a lot of resistance in closing the church. So that really complicated the closure of the church. So we had online church. Yeah, from my basement at home, I streamed and everyone could participate. But with the reopening as a church board, we had, of course, church boards over Zoom. And we preempted the reopening whenever it will happen. And we discussed and voted different safety precautions and guidelines we would implement in our church the moment we could reopen. So on May 13th, I saw that the governor of Maryland said churches could open again. I communicated then directly with the Washington County officials and asked them, because we are residing under Washington County, and they let me know that the following day that we can reopen safely, if we follow the different guidelines. And so on May the 16th, we reopened as a congregation. And of course, with everyone not knowing what is happening, there was not a lot of people attending, but we did reopen. And so slowly but surely, we got into it. Still at this moment, it's not easy. There's more people, of course, attending, but everyone is feeling different emotions. So we try to give different people different space, and still thereby incorporating the different safety precautions.
Wow. Thank you so much. So it was stressful. I cannot imagine now our next person. And by the way, let me do the introductions because I don't want to leave you hanging with that. We have Patrick Reynolds. He is a pastor in our Eastern Shore and has two churches, the Graysonville Church, and then the other one is, I think we called it MOT, right? M-O-T. Yeah. M-O-T. And you're going to need to remind me what that means. What was it? M-O-T.
It's a Tri-City, Middletown, Odessa, and Townsend.
That's what it was. Yes, thank you. And then we also have Sergio Gonzalez, who is pastor in two churches, and one of them is Beacon of Light, and then the other one is, oh boy, escape me.
Cambridge,
where
I am right now.
The beautiful, where you are, yes.
Cambridge Church.
It's a beautiful church building. So thank you for having us in your church too. But I was thinking particularly of Patrick, because Patrick didn't only have, most of our pastors had to adhere to one state governor and then check with their local authorities. Yeah. Patrick has two state governors to follow and then two different counties that he has to be dealing with. How different was one state from the other? How were you able to balance that, Patrick?
Well, it was interesting because Maryland's governor is the board director of the governors. And we expected Maryland to be one of the most strict of all the states to reopen, yet he was one of the first ones to reopen. So like Pastor Reinhardt, Graysonville Church opened early in May, right after we got the approval from the governor's office and the county. So we've been going full bore since late May. And it's been interesting because at the same time, you have another church in Delaware that's closed. So we had to figure out a way to balance doing our adult Sabbath school and our worship service to include both churches. So what we had to do was we incorporated Zoom, and we held our adult Sabbath schools at Graysonville, but we also included the Zoom link for both churches. And what was also a great blessing was the elders at MOT also did the Sabbath school from their houses. So we were able to multitask and use Zoom through both churches in 2 different states. And on top of that, we also included Facebook Live. So we were going live streaming for both churches at the same time. And that was an immense blessing because we were allowed to, we had between 16 and 20 in attendance plus on our Facebook Live feed as well. So it's been a blessing, but a challenge because you're balancing between 2 states, two counties. So it has been a challenge.
I imagine. Thank you for sharing that. And then the other experience that has been different has been with Cesar, because Cesar, he closed church, but never closed the church. Went right into something else. So tell us about that, because that's a neat experience too.
Yeah, funny with me was that when this was all starting, and I talked to you about it, Eli, I said, we have a lot of elderly people in our church and stuff. And I got sick in early March, and I thought that I might have had it. Turned out that it wasn't it. It was just another type of flu. But so we closed early. We closed at the beginning of March. And from the very beginning, I felt like we had to figure something out. So like everybody else, we moved online. We had FB, we had Zoom, Sabbath school, and that worked well. But to tell you the truth, what hurt me the most was that I hated preaching into a camera. It's not for me.
That's right.
And so I have some friends that are in radio, and I called them up and I said, is there something that we can do? And they said, yeah, you could get a low power FM transmitter, very, very low power. And you could just transmit around your church. So I ordered it, ironically from China, and it took a couple of weeks to get back here. But as soon as it arrived, we set it up and we started having Drivein Church. It was cold. We've been lucky because it's been a cooler spring, so it hasn't been crazy hot. But I have preached in the rain. I have preached with a coat on and a hood, and I've preached under all sorts of weather. But it was a lot better for us to have the people there and for us to see each other. And even if it was through windshields, wave, and when they wanted to say amen, they would honk their horns. Oh. And it started, once we did it a couple of times and people said, okay, yeah, this could work, it started to take a life of its own. By the time that the state of Maryland allowed people to get out of their cars, the church members started organizing themselves. And they started bringing their own chairs, and they started sitting outside of the cars in the nice weather. And frankly, it's turned into a picnic every Saturday. We do a pretty simple setup. I have a microphone outside. I have a speaker outside as well. So if you're not sitting in your car, you can hear it in the parking lot. And then the pianist sits inside here, and I have a return for her so she can hear me. And I ask her to play whatever we need to play. She plays. If we have a special music, if she feels like singing, she sings. Everybody sings. And the thing that has changed a little bit is that it's gotten warmer. We're right on the doorstep of July here now. We've had to decide what it is that we're going to do, whether we should come back in the building or not. And the people decided that they didn't want to come back in the building. They prefer it outside. we have left it that if someone is feeling overheated, that they can come into the building to cool off, but nobody's taking us up on that offer yet. Everybody has stayed outside, either sitting under the trees or in their cars. And so we've skirted a lot of issues that other churches have had to deal with, as far as how many people can come. The capacity is, you know, the front and the back of the church. We have an immense parking lot, and we can accommodate more people. And it's also been sort of seeker friendly. If you don't want to come into church and you don't want to talk to anybody, you drive into the parking lot and you watch from a distance, and then you drive off. So it's been really relaxed for us. I haven't had any of the turmoil that I hear other churches dealing with, as far as the boards deciding. The last thing that we changed was this last week, we decided that next week, this coming Sabbath, we're going to meet at 10 a.m. just to stay in the cool of the day. But aside from that, they like what they're doing. They bring their own food. They hang out. They chat outdoors. They know they have to stay socially distanced, and they have to wear their masks and stuff when they talk to each other. But aside from that, it's really a jovial experience.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I'm thinking here, and I'm kind of smiling because you're going to have a challenge, not as far as getting people to the church, is going to be to get them into the church. And that's going to be very different and very interesting for you. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Another question that comes to mind is, how do you deal with supplies? Because I've heard people saying that they tried to get masks and they say, well, 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, and that has actually added to their time that they had to keep the church closed. Have you struggled with that? Has it been easy? Who wants to talk about that?
I can just say here, Pastor, that what we did is we got some materials, and for the young people and children, you know, in the fellowship hall, you know, spread out, we had them making their own masks, you know, that they can just, you know, because not everyone is so positive about the masks, that they can just see, you know, there's nothing wrong with a mask. And at the same time, you know, it's for a lot of them now at school, they make their own mask, you know, so for those who can't get it, we're encouraging, you know, them to make it themselves.
Excellent. So you help with that process for people to get their own mask and all that. That's great. Anyone else how have you been able to provide for your churches, or did they bring their own? How did that work out for Patrick?
Well, we thanks to the Chesapeake Conference and supplies you provided to us as well, we were able to let everyone in the church know that when you come to the church, if you do not have your own mask, but the church has mask supplies for you. And we also have plenty of hand sanitizer, which was interesting because we go out door to door for new individuals coming into the neighborhood, and we hand them a welcome bag. And when we do that, it allows them to be introduced to the church. And to do that, we put a bottle of hand sanitizer in there. So I have a whole basement of hand sanitizer. I mean, like 4 or 5 cases of hand sanitizer. So it was good to use that. We already had it ready to go. But as you said, I ordered hand sanitizer probably 2.5 months ago and still haven't got it. So it's been quite a challenge providing sanitization and gloves and masks.
All right, great. Thank you. Yeah, Cesar, has both of your churches opened up? I mean, as far as Cambridge is already, you already shared with us. What about Beacon of Light? Are they open or are they still closed?
Yeah, let me talk about the PPE first. Our church was one of the 4 churches that was a PPE distribution center. So we haven't had a problem with having PPE, but we did worry about, and this came up during our conversations at board, we did worry that someone might want to make a political statement coming into our church without wearing the proper thing. And that was something else that pushed us to stay outside. And we haven't had to deal with any of those things either. A visitor or even a member that decides that they want to make a stand for one reason or another. But we haven't had to deal with that. Yeah, Beacon of Light is a different situation. Beacon of Light rents its its space from another church. And so the other church has been closed. They've not allowed us in. We're going to be open on July 11th for the first time, but under very, very, like other churches, under very stringent rules. Something that Beacon of Light did very well from the very beginning is that the Sabbath school was probably getting more participation on Zoom than it was in person, because people show up late or whatever, but they were willing to get onto Zoom. And so we're going to keep Sabbath school on Zoom and just have an abridged service at the church. We have a different combination of people. There are people that have a lot of immune deficiencies, and then people that work in the healthcare industry that are often subjected to the virus. And so these two groups don't want to be in the same room at the same time too long. So we're going to do the whole social distancing and PPE and stuff like that. But our services are probably going to be under 45 minutes. There's not going to be any singing. We're going to have a prayer time and then the sermon, and that's it. And if people want to hang out and talk, they can do that outside. But within the building, that's not just per our ideals. It's also the same thing with our renters. We're not allowed in the sanctuary. They will take the sanctuary and we take another room, and we keep the two populations separate like that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. You brought up something that reminded me of something our pastors have dealt with. We have two extremes when you look at the whole spectrum of dealing with this. And you have the individuals that say, this is nothing, is a plot by the government. It's like a flu, and so we shouldn't be doing all these things. And then some people add the element of faith. We don't have faith, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then you have the other extreme of people that are so afraid of it, they don't want to leave the house. What would be your advice, to deal with this? Have you had any conversations of this nature, and some light that you can share on this subject?
Yeah, I'd like to start on this one, because we've been having these conversations because we've been open a long time. We've been having these conversations for a long time. And I've had the same conversation with other pastors. And I'd like to say that at one point or another, the buck stops with you as a pastor, and you have to make a decision. We can go back and forth and argue these things until the cows come home. But at one point or another, it is your job to keep your people safe. And at the same time, it is your job to keep the church open. So you have to adapt and you have to figure things out. The buck stops with you.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, I would agree. Most of my members are still staying at home, and there's quite several of families that want to attend, but they're in contact with me, and I'm telling them, please don't attend yet, because they are at high risk. So while I'm also making it clear to everyone that are attending that the church can't be held liable if you get sick, you are coming on own risk. I'm still encouraging them and those at high risk to rather stay at home. So while the numbers are growing slowly but surely, we want those at risk to rather be at home.
Yeah, we made sure to tell all our church members that as well. And it's interesting, you look at the statistics and it shows that the percentage will continually rise as the pandemic subsides. And we saw that at Graysonville when we first opened back in May. Only a few are attending, and every Sabbath it seems to be one or two more coming to the worship service that feel more comfortable. But we've done our best to have sanitizer, to clean the churches, to have masks, and all that available for them. But it's just a matter of letting people know that there's a lot of information out there, and a lot of that information changes from week to week. One week the WHO says this, the next week they retract their statement, they say this, and one week the CDC recommends this, and next week they don't recommend that. So it's really difficult. The best thing you can do is try to review whatever information is out there, make a logical decision based on that, and your faith in God's protection. But ultimately, as Cesar already said, we have to make a decision and move forward. We can't just sit there and cower in our bedrooms and our houses. We have to get out there, because the gospel mission calls us to spread the gospel of Jesus, and we can't do that sitting in our home.
Yeah. On that tack, I want to say, and I know I'm not the only one, that people during this pandemic and everything else that's going on have had a real tugging at their hearts by God.
Mhm.
And so, we can ask them to watch our FB feed or whatever, but it makes a huge difference for them to show up. And like I told you earlier before we were recording, that we're getting a lot of visitors, actually more than usual at this time of the year. And we have 2 people lined up for baptism this summer that have showed up because of this whole thing. The last thing I'd like to say is that the restrictions in Maryland, especially between restaurants and churches are very similar. And we've been watching what would happen when the restaurants started to open at half capacity. And we haven't had a spike. So that should give us a little bit more, it should make us feel a little bit better about the guidelines that we have to open, because we can see that it's working in the restaurants.
Right. Thank you. Great. All right. So opening the church, you guys went through the anxiety of that, the concern, the worriness of opening. You actually open. Looking back at that moment, and then what has happened following, what word of advice would you give to pastors that are thinking about opening, they have not opened yet, and they're looking forward to in the next few weeks opening? What would be one thing that you'll say, well, please think of this because this was my experience with that? Standard.
Yes, I would suggest that move along with your leaders, collaborate with your leaders, see what's the feeling of the church, and then move along and make the decision, if it's to keep it closer for a longer time or reopening. What I do see is every church's circumstances are totally different and unique. And so there's not a one that fits all here approach. So it depends on the leaders with the members and the pastor to make that decision and then move forward. I think that is very important, that the church should know where it is going. And if it's still closed, to just communicate with your members so that everyone is in the loop, knowing where we are headed. Otherwise, people can get despondent.
Yeah.
Excellent point. Communication.
Yeah.
I think that's a key element. Sometimes we think everybody should know, but communication is great. Any other thoughts, Patrick or Cesar, from your experience of opening the churches?
Just keep in mind, as Pastor Reinhardt already said, communication is key. Don't assume everybody automatically knows this. That's why it's important as pastors, make sure your directory is up to date. Make sure you have phone numbers, emails for church members, so you can get the word out to them and communicate on a daily basis with your leaders, because it's really difficult to try to make a decision on the last second. And also keep in mind that if you plan on opening your church in a couple of weeks, you should already be making phone calls to cleaning and sanitation companies that need to come in there and do professional sanitation and cleaning if you don't have somebody skilled in that area in your church. And that takes time to call them, get a quote, get approval on that. So these things all have to be looked at by the pastor and then the leaders ahead of time, so you don't get caught saying I'm opening this week and all of a sudden you're scrambling to get things done.
Excellent. All right. So one more question. What are you doing about children, youth, and the elderly? So we're talking about the vulnerable groups of people, children, youth, and then going to the elderly. What are you doing?
Let me just state it this way from our side, is that youth has access to all the internet and Facebook, YouTube, just name it. They can access all the services, etc. But we have a lot of elderly that don't have internet or don't know how to do it. And so from day one, from the first week, we've decided, we will take all these people and make DVDs and take it to them. So even till now, every week I'm making rounds to all the members that don't have internet access. I'm taking them the service and the lesson study on DVD. making sure they are still part of the fellowship. Because you can just imagine to be suddenly cut off from everyone you love and fellowship with. So that is quite huge. I'll really encourage pastors to try and do it if it's possible. And then with the children, that's quite a unique approach, depending still on the situation. With us, most of our children are still at homes, so we stream it on Facebook directly, for them to participate with. We're trying to get the materials out of the homes. And then the few that do participate at church, we do it, in the fellowship hall where they are spread out, and we have the different activities.
Excellent. Great. I appreciate that. Any other thoughts on this area?
Yeah, we have a health safety officer that we have decided, someone that's in the health field. And that person has the ability to stop whatever it is that we're doing or to call someone out. And everybody, we made that announcement early on. Listen, this person's job, and it's kind of fun. You're going to get a ticket, or you're going to get a yellow card, like if it's soccer or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then if after you get 2 yellows, you get a red. We haven't gotten to that point yet, so I don't know what's going to happen. But it's just a person whose job is to watch and to make sure that everybody, is doing what they're supposed to be doing. The children, in my opinion, in my experience, I should say, are the toughest ones. And you have to get the parents in on that. And it's the hardest when you're the parent, that's when it's your kids, that's the hardest one to do. But the idea that there's someone whose sole job is to watch out and make sure that everybody's doing what they're, and I don't think nobody's done anything on purpose, to break the rules or anything like that. But you forget, and especially the children need to be, corralled and whatever. And that's their job. And that's how we've been handling that.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. So to sum it up, and as we have many individuals that are thinking right now about opening their churches, folks that are thinking, should I go to church or stay? Help me here if I miss something. So number one, make a decision not by yourself, but get your leaders on board. Make sure that you are in agreement so you can work together with that. When it comes to the people that are fragile, that need to be careful with their health, the advice is stay home, correct?
Yes.
Not a time to come back to church yet. For children, have alternative things, but it is not time yet for them to start getting together. Unfortunately, children have less sense of social boundaries, and they will be more bound to be hugging and embracing each other. And so it might be best to keep the programs on hold for now. Prepare your church, communicate, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
As a pastor, I think you have to make a decision. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of options. You have to adapt. You have to get out of your comfort zone. And when you make that decision, try to execute it to the best of your ability. We really shouldn't be sitting home, not doing anything. That's not our calling. Our calling is to lead.
Well, that reminds me of something, Cesar. I'm glad you mentioned that. So what do you do with the person that shows up and says, I mentioned it earlier, but we didn't finish talking about that. They show up to church and says, oh, this is a lie and nobody needs a mask. And they try to come to church without the mask, trying to hug people and embrace them. What should we do with someone like that?
Well, like I told you, we have a security officer, and that's the first line of defense.
Get the red card. I got a red pen.
We have a security officer. And like I said, we try to make it lighthearted, as much as we can. And we have the security off, and everybody makes, oh yeah, you got called. So there's a sort of a herd mentality there that, hey, we're all pulling together. And to keep the joy and everything, this is what we're doing. So everybody is going along with this. But at one point or another, if that continues to happen, I guess I'll have to have a conversation with someone, and the safety of my people comes first. That's the bottom line.
I actually heard of a pastor who opened the church app and people came, and there was not everybody, but there was a group of folks that came saying, "It's a lie. There's nothing wrong. We're going to be fine," and started to embrace each other and disrespecting all the rules. That was the first Sabbath he opened, and he said, "You know what? We're closing again." And so he closed the church again, made sure people understood the rules, waited 2 weeks, and then tried again. And then people did better the second time around.
Yeah, I think that's wise. I really do.
Yeah. And it goes back to what Cesar mentioned earlier. We're the gatekeepers. We're the shepherds. And that means protecting the flock. And some people has brought the faith element. Oh, we don't have faith. We're not trusting God. My friends, this is not a matter of faith. God will do amazing things. But, you know, in the Bible, it also reminds us not to tempt God, not to act foolishly and thinking, oh, yeah, God is going to protect us. We have to use something that is very uncommon today, and that is common sense, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, because you will get both sides in every experience in that.
So we review a couple of other things. Get materials before you open, so you have the PPEs available for those that don't have it. Am I missing anything that we need to have and think about when we're ready to open?
Just make sure you communicate well with your members. One of the things we didn't really talk about was when all this started, we initiated a phone tree line where we contact every board member or every church member every day. I think 2 from one church, 2 from the other church every day. So throughout the end of the month, we've contacted everybody in both churches to make sure everyone knows what's going on, and it really helps the lines of communication open and minimizes panic and frustration.
That is excellent, to have a phone tree or a system of communication so people continues to be in touch with one another. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know many churches
if you're going to be preaching outside, a couple of tents would do you very well, to have a couple of tents to put up, and make sure that that they'll stay down in a little bit of wind also. So think about that. And some emergency hydration for anybody that starts having trouble in the heat. We have that available as well.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much. This has been a great blessing. I hope that inspires some of our churches that are hesitant about opening or thinking about opening, and it helps them with the process. In our conference, some of our pastors have put really good programs and packages of how to open the church. And of course, we'll be happy. As a ministerial director, I'm happy to share that material with you. If you want to ask for it, we'll be happy to share those ideas with you. Thank you so much, pastors, for making yourself available for this conversation. And we pray that that it will help many as they're thinking about opening and continuing to do ministry. May God bless you. And again, we're here to serve you. Let us know how we can help your church take these steps and make these decisions. Thank you so much.